Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am Tamara Ecker, Managing Director of British American Business, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's session within our Accelerate series. For those of you not familiar with BAB, we are the leading transatlantic business association supporting companies with operations in both the US and UK markets. And our Accelerate initiative is an open community supporting businesses and entrepreneurs looking to grow and expand in those markets. Today, we are incredibly lucky to be joined by a CEO who has had both the vision and execution skills to, in fact, grow a US business into the UK market. I know you are all eager to hear from Robin, but first, just a few logistics for today. We'll begin with a moderated discussion for about 30 minutes with Robin, followed by about 20 minutes of Q&A with you, the audience. If you would like to ask a question, please just send me a chat at any time or use the raise your hand feature and we'll come to you so you can ask your question live. Until then, please keep your microphones on mute, but please do feel free to keep your cameras on. And I should also note that Jetblue incredible supporter and partner to our Accelerate series, and we are big fans of BAB. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Robin Hayes, CEO of Jetblue. Robin joined Jetblue in 2008 and served as the company's executive vice president and chief commercial officer until becoming president of the airline in January of 2014. In February of 2015, he was appointed as JetBlue's third CEO. Prior to joining JetBlue, Robin was executive vice president for the Americas at British Airways. Robin serves as chairman of IATA, the International Air Transport Association, and sits on a number of other boards. Robin, I think we have you. Welcome. You're on mute. We just need to unmute Robin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Sorry about that.
Well, it's a pleasure to see you. Good to see you. Good to have you. So I thought I would ask some questions about personally to start. I think our members would be interested to learn a little more, and then maybe we can turn to some questions about business itself. You know, how to keep the growth trajectory while at the same time kind of maintain the client offering. But if we can start with you a little bit. So it happens that I was lucky enough to visit Bath on my trip to the UK last month. And I understand that your alma mater is in fact the University of Bath. So could you tell us a little bit about your formative years? What did you study? What inspired you? And why did you choose aviation? Was this always your passion?
Thanks, Tamara, and thanks for having me, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I was born in London. I went to the University of Bath to study engineering, actually, electrical electronic engineering. That was my background. I was working for a military defense contractor at the time, and so I did end up sort of in the avionics side of the business. When I left Bath, I got a summer job actually selling duty-free at Logan Airport in Boston, and which is funny because it's the same terminal that JetBlue flies to today. And then when I went back to the UK after doing that, I got a job at British Airways, and so that was how I. And the reason I joined BA was quite funny actually, because when I was selling duty-free, I was at Terminal C during the week and then Terminal E at the weekend, which is where the international flights are out of Logan, which is still, actually the same today. And the BA crew, you always ended up, you were in the jet bridge, you were handing out all these bottles of liquor and cigarettes and things like that. And the BA crew were always the nicest to me. And they would often, offer me like a cup of tea or some water. I thought, this is a very nice airline. So I applied to work there, and I was lucky enough to get in.
And some foreshadowing with the Logan Airport, and of course now your international expansion and your Boston route. But we'll come to that. But so British Airways enticed you over and you found a home there. But what was it about JetBlue that made you make the move?
Well, so I was still working for British Airways. Actually, I was based in New York through till, I forgot to remember the year now. I guess it was 2008. And JetBlue were looking for a chief commercial officer at the time. And it was really luck, actually, how it all turned out, because I got a call from a headhunter about a reference for somebody else for another job unconnected to this. And he just happened to mention, hey, not sure if you saw, but, JetBlue is looking for a chief commercial officer. And, my assumption was at that point that me and my family would go back to the UK with BA. So I got talking to JetBlue. It was in the sort of early 2008 period. And then, took the decision to join. And so I joined JetBlue in 2008.
Was part of that just the appeal of a startup, a newcomer, a disruptor? I mean, what was that part of what interested you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been living in New York. I've flown JetBlue a lot. It was an amazing story. I mean, probably one of the most successful new entrant airlines at the time, and clearly trying to do things differently. And it reminded me, the focus on customers really reminded me a lot of my early years at British Airways. And so it was a bit of a risk, clearly, because you were leaving a very stable global airline to join a sort of a startup, and that doesn't always go very well. But I took the risk, and I was very happy that I did.
And I think that will resonate with a lot of the members who are listening today. I mean, this is a forum for growth businesses, for entrepreneurs, and so I think most of them will understand that concept of risk, and maybe have some questions for you around that going forward. So just pivoting to JetBlue a little bit. So we know that growth businesses come in all shapes and sizes, and JetBlue clearly seems to be growing. And my guess is that part of the secret sauce there is people. So how do you enhance that personal connection with your employees, keep people motivated, especially coming out of COVID, which was, I imagine the most difficult time for an airline?
Yeah, I feel it's almost like starting all over again, because when we went into COVID, so many people left. They took opt-outs, or they decided they wanted to sort of go in a different direction. So we, like other airlines, lost quite a lot of people, and we've been in this crazy hiring mode now for over a year. By the end of this year, I think I worked out that about half of our crew members, which is our word for employees, would have been at JetBlue for less than 2 years. So because we lost so many people, and now we're sort of growing back. So it's hard, right? Because we had kind of created these routines and these customs and these cultural moments that people who'd been in the company were used to. A lot of those got suspended during COVID, because some of that, a lot of that depended on physical interaction. And during COVID, you really wanted to minimize that to the degree that it was needed. And now we're starting again. So, we have a lot of traditions in JetBlue. So, for example, our training center is down in Orlando, JetBlue University. That's where all our new hires come in. So we all go down and meet them on their first day. So, I did that yesterday. There's a lot of JetBlue traditions of like cleaning airplanes between the turns, leaders spending time in the operation, leaders visiting regularly to airports to talk to our crew members and discuss what's going on. And I think what we're doing now is trying to get back to some of those sort of cultural touch points that we've always counted on doing.
You equally have a great presence on social media. Your crew members are so positive. The ones we know and work with really seem to believe in what they're doing, believe in the product, and it shows. And so I imagine that's part of the success story there.
Yeah, I mean, I think That's right. I mean, I think it's always very, that crew member is very excited. It's a growing company. We're always opening new routes. Whenever I go somewhere, it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing next? We focus a lot on the customer and giving our crew members the tools that they feel empowered to support our customers. Trying to remove the obstacles that get in the way of our people providing service. So. Look, we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and it's quite challenging in the current environment because I think, like many companies, our attrition is higher than we're used to. But I think that I'm confident that as we get into next year, things will sort of stabilize a little bit, and we'll start to sort of feel like the new normal. It really hasn't felt normal since 2019 in our industry.
Yeah, no, of course. And you kind of referenced more growth and how do you decide the direction and timing for new growth opportunities? What are really the mechanics behind being ready for more growth or new growth in different areas?
Yeah, so we have a team that looks at that. They obviously have an aircraft order book that is, they know what aircraft are coming and when they're going to come in, and then it's really identifying the best opportunities to fly those airports. We've grown a lot in New York in the last year or so. In fact, we will be 50% bigger in New York in 2022 than 2019, largely thanks to our partnership with American Airlines called the Northeast Alliance. We are moving into a new facility in Newark. We're moving over to the new terminal in LaGuardia, which we're excited about, and the new terminal in Orlando later this year. So, I think because infrastructure is part of this as well. Not only do you need the airplanes and the people to grow, but you need the gates and infrastructure to make that happen as well.
I want to move into some other sort of top of mind issues that's cross industry, DE&I, sustainability, and all that, but. This is British American business. You have just disrupted the market. You have just launched a new route, relatively new route to the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Really, just what how did it start and how did it go? And imagine there were some bumps along the way, but now here you are.
Yeah, a lot of bumps, but no, I mean. It goes back a few years, and certainly for New York and Boston, which are very important to JetBlue, London was the single largest market that our customers flew to that we didn't serve. So, when they were flying to London, they were flying on one of our competitors, and so we've been getting the request for a long time. We spent a lot of time making sure that we thought we could do it profitably, making sure we built the right product. We wanted to, when we go into a market, what we try to do is improve the product and also lower the fare. I mean, that's kind of the JetBlue gospel, if you like. And so, we wanted to create a business class, or we call it a mint experience, that was truly unique, and really kind of gave our customers a sense of flying on a private jet, sort of an intimate cabin. Our crew that work those London flights, our in-flight crew, that's all they do. So they've become really, really, specialized and focused on serving that market. But also for the rest of our customers, what we call core or coach or economy, bring in sort of farm to table organic food, bring in sort of great seatback entertainment, and also the customary JetBlue offers of free Wi-Fi and free TV. And the Brits have loved the fact that they can fly JetBlue and watch free Premier League soccer on the way over to the US. And so, so I think. Look, it's been a great success. Obviously, it's a very limited amount of capacity. We currently really have one flight to Heathrow, one flight to Gatwick. We have announced, the routes to Boston later this year. So, we will never be able to, nor do we intend to sort of be a multi-frequency a day airline traveling to these markets. That's kind of not what we do. But, we wanted for those customers, either leisure or flying on business, perhaps don't get access to some of the corporate arrangements that some of the larger airlines have with large companies. We think we're a great alternative, and that's what we're seeing.
Well, and it's so smart because that's it's an important and growing segment of the transatlantic business community. I mean, I think this forum, this Accelerate forum, is evidence of that in and of itself. You know, we at British American Business equally saw the demand, the uptick in those mid-market businesses going back and forth and needing support. And so this dovetails really nicely into your new offering. And so again, just moving over for a moment. So I travel a decent amount, right? And I took a trip, like I mentioned, to the UK last month, and it honestly was the first time I had ever had a female pilot for my flight. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I heard her voice come over the AV system, I called my 7-year-old daughter, and I was just so excited. And I said, you know, see, women can do anything. But it struck me. And so you are not only, and I mentioned this in the introduction, you are not only the CEO of JetBlue, but you're also the chairman of IATA, the trade association representing the world's airlines. And in 2019, IATA launched a 25 by 2025 global initiative to close the gap in gender diversity in the airline industry. So I'm just, you know, asking you to talk a little bit about that. You know, why does it matter, and how is it linked to growth?
Yeah, no, I think you know, it's an extremely important issue, and I will say it's something that all airlines are working really hard on. So, you know, if we take the pilot role, I mean, there are other jobs in airlines as well that have also been historically very male dominated, like maintenance technicians is another one. And so, you know, if you look in the US, it's just a shade over 5-6% of commercial air pilots are women. So it's grossly underrepresented. So how do you fix that? So, you know, I think that what we've done is we've created a lot of pathways internally for JetBlue crew members to become pilots. And so, because, you know, when I look at us as a company, when I go to our reservations teams, when I go to our in-flight teams, when I go to our airport teams, you know, we have very good gender diversity. We have very good racial diversity. But that's not manifesting itself into roles such as pilots. And so, you know, we've been at this now for several years. We started about 4 or 5 years ago. And so, you know, if you are a JetBlue crew member, you come in to a particular role, you want to then transfer to be a pilot, we will create a pathway for you to do that. We've also extended it this year to our families of JetBlue crew members. So we do see ourselves as a family business. And so now, you know, mom and dad, brothers, sisters of JetBlue crew members can also start to build that career pathway as a pilot. Now, then I get into leadership positions, and, you know, we have some of the same challenges as well in terms of both gender and racial diversity. And so, you know, we run a number of programs, for example, that allow frontline crew members. I saw some this week that are in flight or airports who have, you know, want a career in a corporate role. And we've created, you know, pathways for them. So, you know, you have to put the building blocks in place to, you can't just sort of say you want to change something and not have a plan to do it. And sometimes you have to be patient, because for a role like a pilot, it's going to take you many, many years to get there, just because the amount of training that goes into it. So, you know, I think we've started well. You know, at JetBlue, at a senior leadership team, you know, we have a pretty good representation of women. In fact, the majority of my direct reports are female. And, you know, we are starting, I think, to make some more progress there. But I think we'd all recognize that we have a lot more that we need to continue to do.
I think it's a pretty well accepted idea at this point that, you know, diversity is not only important and the right thing to do, but it actually helps the bottom line, right? So having been in these roles is actually, you know, materially supporting the business.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's no reason for it not to be the case. And so, you I think that organizations are I think, waking up to the fact that, I think for a long time we kind of just said it's the kind of way it is, or we kind of, we talked about things, but they weren't really effective. I think what you're seeing now for both gender and racial diversity is a lot of really good programs happening in organizations that I think will bear fruit over the coming years, because you've always got to take the best person for the job, right? I mean, at the end of the day, in any position, you always want the most qualified person to do it. But what you have to do is create the pathways that allow a more diverse set of candidates to, be ready to assume a certain position and not feel that they don't have that path or they get blocked out from doing it.
Robin, another pressing issue for the airline industry is carbon climate. So JetBlue has set a goal to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2040. So linking back to my question about growth and people, again, why is this not only the right thing to do, but the business savvy thing to do? And will it help you both with customers and crew members?
Yeah, it's funny, coming into COVID, I think that if you talk to European airlines, they've been very focused on this sustainability topic for a long time, and it was just starting, I think, to get more awareness in the US industry pre-COVID, and then COVID came. And as we come out, JetBlue is a member of A4A, which is a US airline trade association that all of the larger airlines are members of. And I think we all recognize the importance of this issue, and we're all trying to do things in our own way to get ahead of it. I mean, at the end of the day, we are an industry that is quite hard to decarbonize, just the physics of flying airplanes around. And so there's a number of things that we are focused on in the next 10 years in terms of buying more fuel efficient airplanes, in terms of investing more in sustainable aviation fuels, which have a lower life cycle carbon footprint. But then longer term, we've got to look at new technologies for flying, different fuel sources, the concept of producing synthetic fuels through sort of power, they call it power to liquid. So, taking green hydrogen and carbon sequestered from the air and producing. So there's lots of, I think, opportunities, but, it's going to require billions of dollars of investment and research and to get there. And so, I think what we're all doing as airlines is getting smarter on this. We're making investments in companies that we think can help us do this. We're talking regularly to manufacturers, and I'm very proud because in the US, all the airlines, we've all committed to signing up to 10% of fuel intake of a sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. And as a global industry, we are committed to a net carbon zero target by 2050.
Do you think that, just going back to the point about talent and this crazy labor market that we're in right now, is that an important piece of the puzzle? It seems to be with this new generation. They want to know that this is high priority for the airline. They want to know that they're not, entering into a situation that ultimately is harming the environment. Do you feel that that's a selling point for you as you're looking to hire?
I definitely do. I think that you don't want to stereotype people and say, well, younger people are more interested in it than people like me. I think there's just a growing awareness from everybody. And the airline industry is going to get more and more called out because as other sectors decarbonize more quickly because they can. 10, 15 years, I imagine most of us will be driving electric cars. It's no longer 30, 40 years away. The polluting effects of airlines are going to be more obvious. And so I think it's only going to be a trend. And, the risk for the airline industry is that we become viewed like tobacco. We become viewed as something that's harmful to health, harmful to people. And when that happens, not only do you start getting governments tax and regulate you to discourage usage, but you get people actually saying, I'm going to choose not to fly. Now, in the US, that's harder than in Europe, because in Europe, there are, a lot more high-speed trains and things that allow you to travel the sort of distances. you know, the difference between the East and the West Coast, for example, or from the Northeast to Florida. I mean, there's no realistic way that you can go from A to B without flying. So I think in the US, I don't see such a big impact there, providing we can get out of it. I do think there will be in business travel. You know, I do think a lot of companies will continue to believe that reducing the kind of business travel they do is the right thing.
And I think we'll probably come back to some of those themes in our Q&A. So we're nearly to our halfway mark. I have one more question, and then I think we'll move into some audience Q&A. But I'm just curious, you know, thinking about the industry as a whole and how much more room there is for disruption. I think I was reading the founder of JetBlue is now working on some other new initiatives, kind of disrupting the market, serving suburban areas domestically. So, you know, what do you see for the future? How much more disruption is coming?
Yeah, so yeah, David Neilman, airline is Breeze, and you know what you know what he's looking at is serving smaller markets that aren't necessarily flown by another airline today. You know, if you look at the large US airlines, the legacy airlines, you know, they developed sort of hub and spoke models where if you want to go from A to B, a lot of the time you got to fly through an intermediary point. And so, you know, he's looking at opportunities like that, saying, I can fly them directly. And so, look, I think there's, you're going to continue, I think, to see startups come in. I mean, the US is a very consolidated industry. You've got 4 large airlines with about 80% of the market. You've got a number of medium-sized airlines like JetBlue. You've got some ultra low-cost carriers, and a lot of airports are getting very full, and it's actually harder to get into. So, you know, I think for the most part, I don't see that changing very much, but I think they'll continue to come around the edges for some smaller airlines. You know, we're an investor in an airline called JetSuite, which flies out of private air terminals at airports, but has a sort of a commercial service. And so, again, that's a great niche business. It will continue to grow, but it'll be relatively small in the scale of things.
Interesting. Good. Well, thank you for that. So now I'm actually going to welcome into the conversation Roger Barton, managing partner of Barton LLP, who also happens to be the chairman of this Accelerate initiative. And so is very close to a lot of the issues that members in our community are dealing with and working with. So Roger, I'm gonna hand things over to you, and I think you might kick us off with a question and get into some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara, and Robin. Thank you for joining us and spending time. I know you're busy. You jutted out of a meeting 30 seconds before this started, so thanks for coming in. I have a few questions on some things you touched on, but you know, sort of an overarching theme of innovation. You know, as entrepreneurs, no matter how small or large the company you know you're running, I think you're trying to innovate. You're trying to create a difference in the marketplace, and you know, it's as you get bigger, I think sometimes that's harder. So I notice, you know, you're not just CEO of JetBlue, but you also have JetBlue Technology Ventures, JetBlue Travel Products. Can you talk to us about, you know, what are the activities that JetBlue Technology Ventures are involved with? It, you know, how does that fit within, you know, the overall mission of JetBlue?
Yeah, so we set up JetBlue Technology Ventures. They're based out in the Valley, as you'd expect. We set it up several years ago, and the idea was to help create the pipeline of innovation to make JetBlue better. So, you know, I think we had loads of stories at the time of people coming to JetBlue pitching ideas, and they didn't really get anywhere. And I think we'd always prized ourselves on being an innovative company. And so, by creating JTV, we created a team out there that really were at the front lines of travel and technology, and they really look for innovative solutions that could help us be a better company. So we don't really make investments in tech ventures to just make money. It's not like a traditional venture capital business. It's really allowing us to be a better company. And so, for example, investing in a AI machine learning company several years ago to help us with the way we revenue management and price, investing in companies that focus on really accurate hyperlocal weather forecasts, that we don't have to rely on sort of, models of weather, at a particular airport. We know exactly when that storm cell's coming in, and we can decide if we've got time to get that flight out or not. So, a few dozen investments now that I think have really helped to sort of maintain that culture of innovation at JetBlue.
That's cool. Is that something your competitors are doing as well, or are you even teaming up with them in those ventures?
Yeah, so a number of our competitors have started to do this since. I think we were probably one of the earliest ones to do it. Whilst we haven't done anything specifically with one of our competitors in the US, a lot of these investments you do work with other people on. So whether it's another airline somewhere else in the world or another travel organization, they tend to be kind of more collaborative investments because you're each bringing something. Like we can bring an airline to a startup and say, hey, why don't we can do a proof of concept here. A hotel company can provide opportunities there, etc.
Interesting. And it kind of dovetails, I think you mentioned earlier, empowering your people as a competitive advantage. And you also mentioned, and I think in a similar context, your leadership team, being on the front line. Is that something, at a cultural level that you try to push through the organization? And if so, how do you reinforce that message?
Well, I mean, I think it's, we've got this phrase at JetBlue called servant leadership, and, not ask someone to do something you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And I think it's just about really staying really connected between the leadership team and frontline crew members. And I do think that during COVID, that has got more challenging, because obviously a lot of people left, a lot of more people working from home, or at least part of the week. So I think we're kind of, we're relearning that to a certain extent, and we have a lot of great traditions at JetBlue, and a lot is kind of rediscovering those. I mean, whether it's, serving lunch to crew members on the holidays, or working in the terminals on the holidays, or cleaning the airplanes, or the sort of town hall meetings that we do. We really try to say we should be probably spending a fairly significant amount of our time doing this type of stuff.
I don't by any means want to dominate the questioning. So I think, Duncan, you have a question? Is that a hand raised or a high five? I'm not up with these emoji things.
It's a hand raised.
There you go.
Hi, Robin. Good to see you.
Hi, Duncan.
I'm just curious about your views about your future input costs and the effect that that's going to have on pricing for consumers. I mean, it seems to me that you must be, with the cost of employees, the labor market, the cost of fuel. I've no idea about the cost of aircraft, but I doubt if they're going down in price. They're probably going up. So, given your model is built on a great service at a very competitive price.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the kind of what does the future look like in terms of pricing for you and the industry in general, and what can consumers and small businesses expect?
Yeah, I definitely bought your tickets early. I mean, I think obviously fuel is a very significant input cost, and we're at a very elevated state at the moment, and so airlines will need to try to recapture most of that. I think we've also all seen pressure on labor costs, not just in our own companies, but a lot of the business partners and other organizations that we use. So we've definitely seen that. And I also think, what you're seeing at the moment in the US, at least, and other parts of the world, is that some of the staffing challenges that exist in terms of limiting future capacity growth. So, whereas historically an airline, the amount of capacity flies linked to the number of airplanes you have, right now, in many cases, and certainly in our case, it's starting to get limited by staffing related issues. whether it's pilots or other groups. So, I think that's going to probably continue for the rest of this year into next year before we sort of start seeing more of a normal environment again. And so that will have the effect of increasing industry airfares for sure.
It'll be curious to watch, won't it? I mean, from the consumer's perspective, that is probably less interesting if you're in the business, but whether this is a kind of a short-term effect on pricing, or whether the natural competition in the airline business, brings the pricing back down again when it can. It'd be fascinating to watch it.
Mm.
Yeah, Robert, I was curious sort of on that same similar point, leisure travel versus business travel. And, what I've read and experienced, business travel is down. We do these Zoom calls now instead of meetings, which is not my preferred way of doing it. But, I think a lot of businesses are trying to cut costs in that regard. Do you see that as still existent in the mix of travel that you're experiencing? And if so, what do you think the future holds in terms of business travel versus leisure?
Yeah, I mean, leisure travel is now more than 100% recovered to 2019. So there's no doubt that people are traveling again. And, some of that's probably pent up demand. And I think some of that is just, people wanting to kind of get back and travel. Business travel is catching up very quickly. I would say that I describe that as sort of 70 to 80% recovered right now. The question is, what is the new steady state? Because I do think that business travel is unlikely. I could be wrong, but I think business travel is unlikely to return to where we saw it in 2019 because, companies have learned ways to conduct business in certain settings. So maybe you had 4 sales meetings a year. Now you're going to have 2 in person and 2 virtually. Now, I do think there's other markets are being created. So as people perhaps work in different parts of the country and do their work from home, and they go to, they travel to the head office for meetings and things like that. But I suspect that business travel won't fully be recovered for a number of years, and that's ultimately when GDP catches up with things.
And so, how do you plan for that in terms of types of planes, routes, how you outfit the planes? Is that something you're going to build in now, or you just want to wait till it settles?
Yeah, I mean, we are over 80% leisure travel anyway, so we have less exposure to the business market. Yeah, I mean, it might mean that some capacity shifted away from high volume business markets. Maybe you used to serve the market 12 a day, you're going to serve it 8 a day, and you're going to fly those airplanes into different markets. I mean, again, a lot of airlines during COVID experimented with flying to destinations near national parks, offering direct service to places they've never flown before because, frankly, that's where the demand was.
And what do you find? You mentioned, staffing. I think every business is complaining about that, and attrition rates and all of that. There's certainly, I think, a debate about, again, like business travel versus leisure travel and what will be the new normal, if there is a new normal. Is this fight for talent and attrition and movement of people within, employment, do you think that's going to continue as well at the same pace? Will that level off? What's your thoughts there?
I mean, I hope it levels off at some point. I mean, I think we're all unclear how many people have actually left the labor market for good. So I think we have to recognize that probably some have. I think still some may be sitting on the sidelines for things to stabilize a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think that we certainly, what we see is that we don't have any issue hiring people. That's not an issue. It's an exciting industry, an exciting brand. But the attrition levels are much higher because I think people are much more willing to, in the old days, if you didn't love your job or there was something you didn't like, you kind of have to wait until something came up, maybe it wouldn't. Now there's so many opportunities out there. And, people are moving between companies much more quickly. I mean, I've talked to some of the tech companies who, and when we lose people to the big tech, I'm like, okay, they're going to go to the big tech companies and stay. But, they're losing people too. So, there's this kind of merry-go-round for talent that hopefully at some point stabilizes into, probably not until next year, I'm thinking.
Yeah. What are you doing, to try to combat that?
Well, I mean, I think we focus a lot on, obviously, we've really scaled up our hiring model. We know we have to hire more people. We lean a lot on our culture, and that when people hear that they feel that they are part of a family and that's an exciting business. And, just kind of give people at the end of the day, I think it's very easy to ignore what companies do when times are tough. I mean, JetBlue in our history, 22 years, we've never furloughed a single crew member in our history. We never have. And so at the moment, that doesn't really have much value for people, because okay, you can furlough me, but I can go get another job. But, during the downturn, these things matter. And I think it's about, people recognizing that there are other values or purposes of organizations. You kind of want to land somewhere that I think you feel, is part of a greater purpose or mission and does things differently.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of that's generational too. You've got certain generations of people that have never lived through a market like that and appreciate, those things. Yeah. We have a couple of questions. Prue Ashby from London and Partners.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Prue, how's it going?
Good. Just a bit of background. We know each other from 30 years ago. A slightly left field question from me. When we were younger, we used to see Concorde taking off and landing on a regular basis. And I just wonder what your view was of the future of supersonic travel and that kind of, real high speed kind of London, New York, 2.5 hours that we did back in those days. Do you see in a visionary future something, coming back like that?
I do think it's funny, the supersonic travel issue. There aren't many things where things were better 30, 40 years ago. Things have actually gone backwards, and speed of flight's actually won, right? And so I think the idea of getting supersonic travel back again, I think, is so exciting. There are some companies looking at it. We certainly talked to some people. The problem is it's a very small market, and of people that would be willing to pay for that type of product. I mean, the Concorde that British Airways have, it was great on London, New York. It did a few other things, but also the geography of London, New York was pretty suited to Concorde. So I think it's possible by the end of this decade, if not early next decade, that there are, supersonic type airplanes. I think they'll be for smaller, I don't think it'll be 100-seater. I think it'll be something that's much smaller. But I don't think it's going to become a major part of our aviation. And you also have to do it in a sustainable way as well. You have to demonstrate that it's not going to pollute the environment any more than airlines already do. But good to see you again, Prue. Thanks for tuning in.
Robin, I had a question. Again, innovation and leading an organization, and we as entrepreneurs, where do you look in terms of, you're from a flyer perspective, it's a customer experience, right? So where do you look to get sort of best practices on serving a customer, having the customer experience being at its top level? Do you look within your industry, outside the industry, a bit of both? If it's outside, what are the things you look at for best practices?
I think, we look, we certainly look in our industry. We try to steal the best ideas from other people. We have a pretty innovative team ourselves. And then we definitely look across other industries. And I think as we think about how our business has digitized and the things that customers want to self-service and do, we've definitely learned from other sectors, right? I mean, in terms of how you board an airplane, what service you can offer on the airplane. I mean, that's very specific to our industry. But when we talk about how we support customers beyond that, we definitely look at what others have done, and that's where our tech ventures team can help as well, because they're talking to a lot of these innovative organizations all the time, trying to come up with new ways of solving old problems.
Interesting. Nick Burge has a question. Nick?
Thank you. Just going back to fuel costs, supply chain costs, etc. What are your views over hedging of fuel costs first, and then secondly, how quickly, and I know this is a sort of broader aerospace engineering question, do you think we can get to significantly lower carbon use and or electric planes?
Yeah, so on the first question, sorry, let me, which the sort of net new technology first. The three opportunities in the next 10 years are as follows: sustainable aviation fuel, but even if we got to 10% of usage by 2030, that would be viewed as a good outcome. There's just, the production isn't there. Secondly, more efficient air traffic control procedures, particularly in the US, actually could be high single digits of percentages of lower fuel burn. And thirdly, investment in some of these next gen engines and technology, which JetBlue and other airlines are doing, which brings about a 15 to 20% benefit. That's kind of the three things that are possible between now and the sort of end of this decade. Beyond that, you're looking at new types of fuel, new types of airplane. Airbus is talking about developing a sort of a hydrogen-powered airplane from 2035 onwards. And that is what you're going to need to get aviation over the line to this net carbon zero number. So, I think that electric airplanes, I think it's going to be, those are going to be small airplanes. So there's just not the power density there to fly big airplanes, but small regional 10-seaters as the electric airplane flying short distances, that's certainly possible. We're also an investor in Joby Aviation, which is a sort of what I call a electric air taxi type model. Again, you're going to see that, but I think that's largely going to be replacing where people are driving today, because it's going to be pretty short distances. Sorry, Nick, what was the first question? I forgot. The first one.
Your commercial views on hedging of jet fuel costs.
Hedging, yeah. I wish we'd hedged. We haven't hedged for a long time. I think most US airlines don't. I don't think over a cycle you gain by hedging. But, I do think given what we've seen in the last, several months, and, something we need to keep evaluating. But historically, we've not been an airline that's hedged.
Yeah, I mean, if I can, it is noticeable that there does seem to be a difference between US businesses and European businesses on that strategy, doesn't there?
Definitely. The European airlines are much more heavily hedged.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you, Nick. Nick, thank you. Alistair Standing has a question. Can we bring Alistair in?
Yes, another left field question. I was just wondering, given the rise of nationalism around the world, whether you've done any research or thought into whether the focus in the near future, yes, within political boundaries.
Sorry, so I wasn't research within political.
Yeah, so obviously airlines think about global transportation, but I think with the rise of nationalism, I think people will be focused more within the country rather than across borders.
You mean travel patterns?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I think actually what's driven more, there's definitely been a shift to the domestic industry here in the US for the last year or so. But I think that's largely due to COVID and the fact if you want to travel internationally, you come back, you have to do a test, and people are terrified of getting stuck somewhere because they suddenly get COVID. So no, we see a lot of pent up demand for international still. And I think that will continue. I think obviously people will avoid the hotspots and areas that they may have concerns about visiting. We don't tend to fly as JetBlue. We don't tend to fly to those markets anyway. But no, I think we'll continue to see both healthy domestic and international travel.
Yeah, great, very promising.
Thanks, Alistair. Robin, a question you touched on about air traffic control improvements could significantly reduce carbon footprint. And being a New Yorker flying out of LaGuardia, which is now, you no longer have to go down to the C terminal in the ground floor and feel like cattle. But the infrastructure bill and infrastructure spending that we've all heard about, how much of that is going to reach the airline industry, and what of that do you think would improve the efficiencies?
Well, I think, I think airports, when we think about investment in our world, it tends to be airplanes, airports, and air traffic control. It's the three A's. And so, certainly airlines are investing a lot in more airplanes. In terms of infrastructure, LaGuardia is a great example. It's a beautiful new terminal. It really is. I flew through it the day before yesterday, but there's no extra runways or aerodrome capacity at LaGuardia. So I think what we have to focus on is how do we can get more airplanes through the system. LaGuardia shouldn't just be about having a nicer terminal to sit in when there's a delayed flight, although that's very nice. So, I think the infrastructure that I'm most interested in and focused on is the infrastructure in our air traffic control system that will allow throughput. The airlines are very concerned this summer about shortages of staffing in air traffic control centers. We've already seen on some weekends and some weekdays delays going into Florida because the Jacksonville center is not fully staffed, even though there's no significant weather in the system. And so I think that that's going to get very frustrating for travelers and airlines if we don't stay ahead of that growth. And so, airports have plenty of ways to invest in infrastructure, build new terminals, build new facilities. I think I worry more about this sort of air traffic control investment, making sure that happens.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And it is, invariably, if you're going to fly to LaGuardia, if there's a drop of rain, you're going to sit, an hour and a half before you get to take off from wherever you're landing into LaGuardia. Then you get to see a nice tour of Connecticut as they try to go past Flushing and back around. And then, maybe your jet bridge is not working. You'll be on the tarmac for a while. I'm gonna thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Tamara. Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Some great insights. Tamara, over to you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Roger. We have about 5 minutes left, and I think if I can, maybe just one final question. Again, linking back to this kind of growth businesses, and that would be just some of the nuances as you've transitioned from a domestic business to an international business, and what has that meant, logistically, mechanically, but also philosophically for the business.
Yeah, I think I think one of the challenges is as you become a more established business, how do you continue to innovate and keep people excited, and how do you guard against complacency? And I think part of that is an excitement around what we're trying to do, what we're here for. We try and do things differently compared to the rest of the industry, and just give our people a sense of excitement around that. And but I think, and coming out of COVID, this was a near-death experience for the industry. And U.S. industry got so much support, government support, and I think that in many respects it's a fresh start for all of us, a rebirth, if you like.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Robin, thank you not only for taking the time to chat with our group today, but also, more broadly to JetBlue for supporting our Accelerate initiative. We're incredibly grateful for that. And Roger, thank you for your leadership in the initiative as well. So thanks to everyone for joining. We will see you again soon with another program. And Robin, thank you again. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.